This is Ukradowski of WeAreChange.org, joined by Tim Picciott, the Liberty Advisor. And of course, we will be going over all the latest economic news that's happening right now. And of course, as I've been saying from the very beginning of this, the economic ramifications from everything happening will be bigger than actually what is happening. And that's exactly what it looks like it's going to be, as it's being announced right now that trillions in spending could explode the U.S. deficit to World War II levels. Again, the United States is literally adding potentially $5 trillion at least to its deficit. And people are like, not going to have any impact. And of course, it's going to have a very severe impact, as we are only seeing still the beginning phase of a lot of the sickness spreading all across the United States, as Donald Trump himself is bracing for a very painful 2 weeks that, of course, will correlate to a very unstable, very painful time in the markets. And of course, there's going to be other individuals who are going to be benefiting off of that. We covered that on the main channel, talking about the secret Federal Reserve bailouts. But there's other large corrupt institutions like the IMF. If you haven't heard of the IMF, I definitely recommend you read the book Economic Hitman. Great book detailing the actions of organizations like the World Bank and the IMF. But the IMF right now is saying, even right now, that some banking systems may need help in case of worst case scenarios. And if you look at what the IMF usually does, they usually don't help people. But again, during these times, there's a lot of news of bailouts. There's a lot of news of more stimulus bills.
Let's expand upon that a little bit. So the IMF, and actually I do have the book right here. So Confession. Actually, this is the new version. So New Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So I need to read the updated one. But what the IMF does, the International Monetary Fund, actually acts like a bank. The World Bank actually acts like a fund. The Federal Reserve isn't federal, doesn't reserve anything. So what they do is, if you're a country and you're in debt, you're Zimbabwe or whoever, they'll give you a loan, then you can't pay back the loan, and then they'll give you another loan, so that way you can make the interest payments on the other loan. And then when you eventually can't forfeit that, they'll say, oh, well, these beautiful ports, these beautiful fishing villages you have over here, this beautiful agricultural resources or land or minerals. Oh, well, thank you. How about, in exchange for, this loan that we knew you could never pay back to begin with, we'll take that. And then, by the way, to get you back on your feet, we'll give you another loan. And then, rinse, repeat. That cycle goes over and over again. And that's how, the IMF has basically been used as financial hitman.
It's like the 2008 financial housing crisis, but on a larger scale throughout all the other developing third world countries that, of course, the U.S. intelligence agencies work with and intervene with, and end up essentially just looting and robbing countries blind. Well, very similar things happening right now. And of course, when people are talking about bailouts, people are talking about having government intervene. We have to understand, usually when government intervenes, it usually makes the situation that they're intervening to a lot worse than it originally is. But there's a lot of talks about, bailouts of people working. Airbnb is even talking about helping out some of their super hosts. There's other news about a potential car bailout. We heard about the car industry bailout a couple of years ago, but we're hearing that right now, as some news is coming in, that the Ford stock could actually go down to zero. And they're predicting maybe there could be even a total auto collapse in the United States. How are you seeing the auto industry and other things in the market right now, Tim?
Well, it's probably a good time to, if you need a new car, to hold on for a little bit longer, because there's probably a lot of good deals coming onto the market. And because think about, so many people who are out of work now. A lot of people spend way too much money on a car. I mean, actually, I drive a 2011. That's that basically, for me, it's it's a car, just a vehicle.
It's depreciating in value as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And so there's going to be, a huge amount of people who, a lot of people, they buy fancy cars, they try to impress people, then they have to go to a job that they hate to, impress people they don't even like. And so now they don't have the job, and now there's no one to impress because they can't go out anywhere. And so people are probably going to be like, screw it, this $500 a month car payment, I'm just going to go give it up. And then there's going to be a huge glut of cars on the market, which is going to probably then drive down prices. And so, but there's always opportunity somewhere. Like, I'm looking, into getting a car, but I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll just wait and a couple months here, and we'll probably get some good deals. But yeah, and then look where a lot of these bailouts even went, like the GM and Chrysler and all these companies. I mean, we literally bailed companies out in 2008, and then they used that bailout money to then shift their operations overseas. And then getting back to the air,
and then continue slave labor. How many quote American companies are really globalist companies that depend on slave labor from other countries? I mean, it's just absolutely insane. If you look at this latest kind of sickness spread, there's also some correlation with that, with, of course, high numbers in Italy being correlated with slave labor that they were importing from China. There was this scheme going on in Italy to have products that were supposedly made in Italy, but to do that, the government of Italy and China agreed to send a large number of slave workers to Italy so they could technically say that their items are made in Italy. And again, this is happening all over the place. This is also one correlation why they're saying that the numbers of sicknesses in Italy has risen to the level that it has. But this also happens in the United States, happens in other countries. And let's not forget that this whole big globalization effort, importing third world slave labor and depending on them, getting rid of our manufacturing, getting rid of low paying and middle paying class jobs in the United States, all happened because of the wonderful plans by Henry Kissinger and, of course, David Rockefeller. That's another thing that people need to be reminded of, especially when the United States is dependent on many of their medical supplies from China. Because of slave labor, they save a little bit of money. Even with shipping it all the way from halfway across the world, they still rather use unethical slave labor in China, which is absolutely mind-boggling. But now we're getting finally a reality check. Sorry, Tim, I kind of went off on a rant there. Go ahead.
No, and that's everybody loves a good rant every now and then. But yeah, so one thing I want to point out, and this is perfect because you're talking about big globalist companies. Well, big globalist companies have been the one who've been the recipients of pretty much all the stimulus, all the quote unquote bailout money that's going around, and really what is going on is that money is then all going to the big S&P 500 companies. There's another index out there called the S&P 600. So the S&P 600 doesn't include all the mega caps. Even with all stimulus in the world, there has been virtually no bounce at all. And this is coming from a tweet that I'm reading over here. This is the index that tells you what is going to happen with the economy. Deep recession, minimal recovery. So we're taking a look at the S&P 600. It's just been, absolutely decimated. Very, small bounce in there. Nowhere near what you'd expect, from what you saw in the S&P 500. And just, reading here from Investopedia, the S&P 600 is an index of small cap stocks managed by the Standard & Poor's. It tracks a broad range of small companies that meet specific liquidity and stability requirements, blah, 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 blah. And they have market caps between $450 million and $2.1 billion. So still big companies, but not the big mega companies. I mean, you take a look at, something like Apple, who probably has, $200 billion in cash. And these are market caps of, at the top end as $2.1 billion. Now, I'm taking a look at Morningstar.com right now, and let me just get a better screen share going on over there. So what we guys can see down over here, on a 5-year time period, this has actually averaged negative 2.63% per year. Meaning, if all the gains you would have had from 2015 all wiped out. Year to date, down 33%. 1 year, down 25%. 3 year, negative 7% per year for 3 years. 5 year, negative 2.63%. So this has been a bloodbath. There's been absolutely no recovery in what's going on over here. Then we're taking a look at another chart. Which one are we taking a look at? The Russell 2000. This is more like the heartbeat of America in terms of the companies that the Russell 2000 represents. It's not going to have those big mega companies that we're talking about. It's it's sort of like the S&P 600, but with 2,000 companies. Same sort of deal. Year to date, down 31%. Trailing 3 year, it's averaged negative 6.94%. Trailing 5 year, negative 2.7%. So what this means is you could have invested in 2015 and you would have been negative the entire time. So when Trump wants to talk about make America great again, he was just making the big globalist companies that he hated, supposedly hated. Those are the ones who are getting rich, not the small everyday American companies. And this was already after this index before everything happened and kicked off in February. The Russell 2000 was a joke. Pretty much the entire time Trump was in presidency, almost nothing happened to this. Now, I guess there is, a tiny little bump, but even in So when Trump came in office, it was up 12%, and then it was down 13% in 2018, up 22. Now, if you're down 13, you've got to go up about 26 to get back to even. So, so the entire Trump presidency, what would represent this, the small everyday American companies, those have been losing money. Now, it's not Trump's fault. I mean, you could have elected Jesus, and this stuff wouldn't have been able to been stopped, which is the exact quote that I said in my first podcast ever made. Now, this is taking a look at and I'm only I am a financial advisor, so every time I bring up a fund, I've got to give all sorts of disclaimers, provisos. I'm not recommending this. I'm just saying that, hey, we're taking a look at this fund right now that represent from Fidelity that represents all global stocks minus America. So even on a global level, similar bloodbath type deal, taking a look at a 5-year time period, negative 0.65%. Now, there are other famous kind of financial, I'm not really famous, but there's other financial advisors out there who are saying things like, oh, if you were just invested, you got to get away from American assets. You got to get away from the dollar. Well, that strategy would have still gotten wrecked. So, I'm sure a lot of people can realize the person I'm talking about right now, but, with that person and myself, we were both into gold. I was into crypto. He wasn't. He's been big into international stocks. For a little bit, a few years ago I was, and then I pivoted and essentially...
But hold on, if you're not investing in American stocks, what other stocks are you investing? Since again, all the other countries are being hit by this, and of course, a lot of countries are not taking.
No, I was saying international. I was saying international. Yeah, I was saying international. So people are saying move away from the dollar, and it was even the other international stocks have been getting slammed as well. So on a 5-year,
very interesting. The dollar has been going up, but also China is reporting that they won't even have a contraction, which is also mind-boggling as well.
I'm going to call fake news on that. But yeah, I mean, I did see the report.
They're saying it, and of course, you just can't trust the Chinese government at all. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm calling complete fake news on that with all their BS statistics. I mean, I wrote an entire book on how they rigged the American numbers, and that is because it's important not just to say, oh, it's rigged. It's important to know exactly how they're doing this. So actually, so if you guys text change the news, one word, no spaces, the number is 71441. You'll be on our emergency backup text list, and then also you will get my 2019 crisis retiring presentation and my book called How It's Rigged, the economy, on how they actually do rig all this stuff. Now, switching gears.
And it's important to know, it's not just the United States rigging this. The Chinese government and the Chinese economy is also rigged. A lot of it's, just dummy money is in fake real estate. That's why there's whole cities that are just totally, completely abandoned, because that's how they calculate their kind of economic growth. And all of it is a farce. All of it's a lie. So again, just like our markets are manipulated, so are theirs. Those are the two biggest kind of world economic markets. And this is another thing, because if one market falls, the other market, according to some people, will fall as well, because they're so interconnected with each other. But I think what we're seeing right now is reasons why we shouldn't be connected, especially with with China wanting global hegemony over the United States. Am I correct on that assessment? Or what do you think, or do you have anything else to add to that point?
Yeah, no, I agree with this. We are such an interconnected economy that, something that goes, especially with the big S&P 500 type companies, that they have so many profits overseas that if something is going bad over here, then it's going to affect something over there. We don't live in a vacuum. And so a lot of people think, especially, all the policymakers and people in Congress think, oh, we'll just tinker around with this little thing over here on the edge, or tinker around with that. And what they don't realize that when they tinker with something over here, it messes up something over there. Then they try to fix something over there, and it messes up something over there. And it's also, I guess, you can relate that a lot to the healthcare system. People always want to attack symptoms. I'm overweight, or I don't feel good, so if I just take this pill, but then this pill is only attacking the symptom, doesn't attack the cure. And so ultimately, the main thing, and this drives me nuts, so I see it in the comments like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to the Fed being private, that our money is owned by the Federal Reserve. We have to borrow it from them, which is a private bank. We have to borrow from them into existence, and so we are essentially, until that issue is fixed, I don't give a what about any other issue in the world until we get rid of the issue that means that I'm not a slave anymore, that means my kids aren't slaves, that your kids aren't slaves. That's the most important issue in the world. And people are saying, oh, well, how come you guys are just talking about finance? Well, sorry, we're watching the complete collapse of the entire financial system and the Federal Reserve coming and making their move to own the entire world. And sorry, that's not important enough for some people. And this wasn't meant to start off being a financial show. And I guess we're talking about economics in this video, but the Fed is making the move, and this is the most important thing. So I don't care about whatever political football issues going on. The fact that I'm still a slave, you're still a slave, your kids are still slaves, because we need to borrow our money from a private Federal Reserve that never had the money to begin with, and then they come in, they buy up all the companies' bonds. Then if the company goes bankrupt, then they end up owning the companies, and then you've got a private central bank owning these companies, which is then the merger of the state and corporations, which is fascism. That is not, but I mean, technically, I guess it isn't, because it's a private central bank, which is really acting more like a mafia. Which, so in essence, what they have is they have a complete monopoly on the issuance and currency of credit, and then they have the monopoly of force, being the government, who will come with guns to basically kill you if you don't pay the interest. And so for me, that's why I get riled up over this issue, because it's it's a boring issue. We're talking about lots of big words, and it is very complicated. But the not complicated version of it is private people own our ability to transact and have free commerce, and they have been messing everything up. It's been going on since 1913. Yeah. And it's going to end at some point. And I'd rather have a peaceful ending of it than a Mad Max scenario. And what the Fed is doing is they're going to make sure that it ends up being the Mad Max scenario.
Yeah, and we don't have capitalism. We have now a steroided, filled 30-day trial of communism for the 0.1%. That's essentially what's happening right now. All of their profits, all the money that they made, hand over fist. Well, that's privatized. That's fine for the 0.1%. Everything else for everyone else, oh yeah, you're just screwed. And yeah, we talk about a lot about the economic numbers, because again, the economic numbers do matter. I've been saying the economic ramifications might be bigger than the actual cause of everything happening right now with this sickness.
100%.
I talk about a lot of the social, political stuff usually on my main channel, but we're going to be doing that today on this channel. We're mixing it up because again, sometimes the economic Federal Reserve policies are way more important, and they do deserve all the attention. So we're going to keep mixing it up. Next video, social, political updates about the latest information around this sickness spreading all over the world. Stay tuned for more here on Change the News.